Good evening. This evening, just want to talk to you a few minutes about, look at John chapter 21, verses 18 through 23. It's a conversation that Peter is having with the Lord, and it's kind of regarding the beloved disciple John. And that's John chapter 21, verses 18 through 23. Now, Jesus is starting off talking to Peter. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he, Peter, would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, again speaking to Peter, "Follow me." Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, John, following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper and said, "Lord, who is the one who betrays you?" Peter, seeing John, said to Jesus, "But Lord, what about this man?" And Jesus said to him, well, there's no "and" there, I added that, but in the next verse, Jesus said to him, "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me." Then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you?" And that is the point that Jesus was making. And I believe this is what Jesus is still saying to us today. What is that to you? You follow me. People bring up a lot of different excuses for not following the Lord, for not following what he's told us to do, for basically discounting a lot of things that he said. People bring up the thief on the cross and say, well, he wasn't baptized, but they forget that he was still under the law of Moses. Jesus hadn't died and been born again and been resurrected. So, but even if that were not so, even if the thief on the cross is an exception, we have to look at what Jesus says, and we still have to follow Jesus. What is that to you? You follow me. So it comes down to, who do we follow? Are we obeying Jesus? Is Jesus our king? Our king, or a king, is sovereign over us. He rules, he commands, we follow, we do. When I was in the Air Force, if my commanding officer or sergeant told me gave me an order, told me to do something, I did it. We followed orders, right? And that's how it should be when we're following Jesus. Are we following Jesus? Jesus teaches us the law of love. He teaches us to care for the needy and for our enemies, to even love our enemies, to do good to our neighbor, even people outside of the family, to strangers, because sometimes, in some places, we are the stranger, just like God told the Israelites back in the Old Testament. When they were in Egypt, they were strangers in a strange land. Sometimes we are the stranger. And he tells us to spread the gospel and to make disciples. So do we follow him and his law, or do we search and find scriptures that seem to give us an out? Scriptures that maybe don't mention baptism, maybe scriptures that don't mention helping others or helping the ungodly, or scriptures that we use to say that we're only bound to certain books and certain epistles or acts, that we're not bound to the rest of what Jesus taught. Some people will say that the Gospels are part of the Old Testament, that Jesus was living under the law and it doesn't apply to us. I've heard this recently, so I'm not, it's kind of odd. But anyway, when we think we find those excuses, those got you scriptures, that seem to fit what we want and not what the Lord has commanded us to do, we need to remember who the King is. We need to remember who we follow. And we need to remind ourselves of what Jesus said. Even if we think he does make an exception, or if we're seeing the ungodly, the sinful enriched with power and fame, and maybe their lives look a lot better to us, but Jesus says, what is that to you? You follow me. And we need to remember that in times of trouble and persecution, remember that like Daniel was saved from the lions, well, we may not be saved from the lions. What is that to you? You follow me, right? Jesus is still saying that to us. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saved from the fire. We may not be saved from the fire. What is that to you? You follow me. Most of the apostles were martyrs, right? Executed for Christ. A lot of the early Christians died for the Lord. What is that to you? You follow me. That's what Jesus is telling us. Jesus died nailed on a wooden cross, beaten and bloodied for us. We're not promised a peaceful life, an easy life. We're promised tribulation, a difficult path, and we're promised persecution. What is that to you? You follow me. But don't take this the wrong way. I don't mean it like everything's bad and negative. We're also promised a new city. We're also promised a new life with God and the Son forever, if we stay faithful. Just don't look for the exceptions, for the ways out. Don't make those comparisons and think you want the life that others have. Like Peter, sometimes we think we see things that are unfair. We get too concerned with others and how they're doing. Maybe their situation looks better. We get that the grass is greener complex. And at those times, we need to remember what Jesus told Peter. What is that to you? You follow me. So if anyone this evening would have a need that we could help you with, anything we can pray for you for, need to make any recommitment, please come forward as we stand and sing.